The works of manga artist Takako Shimura are renowned for their delicate use of tone, sincere theming, and nuanced characters, and over the years he received a fair amount of attention in the West for offering some of those realistic and true-to-life portrayals of her subject matter that the medium has to offer. Looking at her works that have been adapted into anime, we have Aoi Hana, lauded for perhaps being the most grounded and mature lesbian romance series to date. Unfortunately, it also happened to be inhumanly boring, so next up we have the critically acclaimed cult favourite Hourou Musuko, or Wandering Son. The show stars a cute kid named Nitori working through a wealth of transgender issues with his friends. He wants to be a girl, while his best friend Takatsuki wants to be a boy, and the two of them are forced to reconcile their identities against cultural and societal norms. Now what makes this also interesting is the ways in which the show presents its themes. As we all know, anime can be really stupid, and more often than not the realm of anime is decidedly removed from reality. And while this can definitely be hilarious and refreshing, we absolutely need shows like Hourou Musuko, a show that takes an exceptionally thoughtful and mature lens to the issues it presents. Nitori's dissatisfaction with himself and even stronger dissatisfaction with how others see him is something that pretty much everyone can relate to, regardless of whether they've been through his exact experiences. Hourou Musuko is loaded with relevant commentary and critique of modern gender roles and expectations throughout. For example, barely anyone bats an eye when two girls come into class wearing boys' uniform, while Nitori is branded a pervert and a freak for coming to class in a girl's uniform, and the show reminds us just how arbitrary some of our distinctions between masculine and feminine can be. Everyone's so quick to villainize Nitori and Takatsuki for breaking our societal rules that it can be easy to forget that we made those rules in the first place. There's nothing innate about a girl's physical makeup that makes them biologically predisposed to skirts and frills. It's just what they were told. Cultural guidelines that fluctuate massively over the course of human history. It's not necessarily that kids are unhappy with who they are, rather that they're unhappy with what they've been given. Over the course of the series, the cast experiences bewilderment, ridicule, and rejection from their peers, and slowly learn how to deal with that, while forming their own unique relationship with their gender. And I say unique because Hourou Musuko often avoids rigidly defining any of the characters as one thing or another thing, and I think that's a big part of what makes this series so special. It takes this complex issue and presents it with complexity. Genius, I know. None of the characters' identities are ever presented as black or white, rather some degree of grey, something that they themselves have to define, and that's exactly how it should be. This ephemeral sense of uncertainty and unpredictability is reflected beautifully by the show's art style, heavy on gentle brushstrokes and washed out pastel colours, lending the series a nostalgic, sentimental quality. The show looks like it takes place in a white void where only the most immediate objects and backgrounds are rendered in detail, which I guess is cool. It's kinda like Usagi Drop or Kimi no Todoke, but much heavier on that glossy sheen effect. One problem I had with the show's visuals is that a lot of the cast has its awful case of same face, and I really struggled differentiating some of the characters early on. But that's something you'll likely adjust to, if you have that issue at all. When the show really puts its back into it and pulls out all the stops, it can deliver on some seriously gorgeous and emotional sequences, especially when coupled with the show's very pretty OST. Now, as impressive and likable as this show is, Hourou Musuko won't be making a dent on my favourites list anytime soon. There are a number of things keeping me from really loving this show, most ironically being that despite heavily leaning towards subtlety and realism, it's pretty difficult to believe in. I do question the idea that all these sexually conflicted kids just happen to be in the same class, but that's something I can sweep under the rug. Much more difficult to ignore, however, is that the characters are a little too young. And this is an issue because the show doesn't seem to realize it. The kids in Hourou Musuko exhibit a level of emotional clarity and maturity far exceeding the expectations of any 12-year-old. And as the characters progress and the love triangles and rectangles start to emerge, it can be very easy to forget that the characters on screen are supposed to be middle schoolers as opposed to young adults. But with that said, the story requires that they remain at this prepubescent stage, as Nitori nervously anticipates his eventual deep voice and facial hair, so the show's pretty much written itself into a creative corner. I'm not even totally sure that this is necessarily a criticism, but I just can't buy the idea that these events could actually be taking place, because this just isn't how real kids behave or communicate. My other issue involves the series' relatively narrow scope. Hourou Musuko explores its central themes of gender roles, identity, and adolescence exceptionally well, but this also takes priority over pretty much anything else. In other words, the show isn't exactly rich with things going on, and as it progresses it can get pretty meandering and repetitive. I might suggest watching through Hourou Musuko over a wide stretch of time, as opposed to watching every episode in quick succession for the sake of writing a video. My god, I've become what I hate. It's not that I'm not interested in the characters and their lives, but I feel like the series went out of its way to portray this one aspect of their lives over everything else, which leads to a lot of the same points and a lot of the same conversations in the later episodes. I honestly can't imagine what this show would look like if it was anything over 12 episodes. In fact, I'm not even entirely convinced that this whole story couldn't have been adapted into a more cohesive feature-length film. A lot of my gripes with the show's structure and pacing are likely due to the awkward way in which it was adapted into anime. You see, the manga actually begins while Nitori and friends are only in 5th grade, so the anime basically drops us in about 5 volumes deep. Relationships are already established, hearts are already broken, we're very much in the thick of the story, and the audience is left playing catch-up. It's very strange. And as I'm sure you've guessed, the anime hasn't adapted even half the story of the manga, but that's a criticism I could level against most manga adaptations. The series doesn't strike me as very rewatchable. It explored all of its ideas and communicated all of its points, and like there's a wealth of super interesting and lovable characters who I just have to revisit. But in the grand scheme of things, none of that really matters. I'm just so glad this show exists, and it's something we desperately need more of. Everything about this series feels distinctly outside of the modern anime sphere, from its voice performances to its pacing to its art direction. You really cannot get any more grounded or humble than Hourou Musuko, and of course that isn't exactly conducive to high Blu-ray sales or merchandising, but to hell with that. The show doesn't demand our attention with flashy gimmicks, just like how Nitori doesn't go out of his way to demand society's attention with his cross-dressing. He doesn't dress up because he wants to make a statement or to shock people, he does it because it feels right. He wants to be cute, and he wants others to see him as cute, and through the sincerity of the show's presentation, it's a feeling that everyone in the audience can understand and relate to. I actually wanted to dress up as a cute girl for the sake of this video, but unsurprisingly my wardrobe couldn't quite come through for me, and none of my female friends were feeling it either. Unbelievable. You know, regardless of whether or not it's exactly for me or not, Hourou Musuko is something I consider to be a morally good show. It's an eye-opening series that really makes you think about your own attitudes and behaviour, and somehow manages to not be watered down whatsoever by any anime baggage. Its very existence marginally improves the anime landscape in itself, and in a way, that's the most glowing compliment I could possibly give.